Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I'm David Jones and I do this normally every Friday. We take a look at the markets, what's going on, where the opportunities might be, and where the trades might be next week. I've had a good week this week. I've done a few trades this week. Not much has changed in terms of trends. You know, if you look at something like the S&P, the US index, there was a gap open on Monday due to the China trade deal over the weekend. But that recovery has carried on. DAX, German market, hit fresh all-time highs on Monday, as did the Spanish. It's been strong, that Spanish market. And French, not quite. Italy is. So stock market recoveries continue. It's been an interesting week in gold. I went short gold yesterday. That's done all right. That was a bit of a textbook trade. We'll talk about that. And that's it really. So what we do, we whiz through all these different markets, have a look at what's going on, see where the trades might be, and if there's any markets you want looking at, if you put it in the chat, we'll take a look at those as well. There we go. Right, let's just get some housekeeping out of the way. Let's do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. This presentation does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, I completely forgot to do the list of the major economic announcements for next week. So let's have a look at the calendar. Let's do it raw. So what have we got next week? Is that EU inflation? Yeah, EU inflation on Monday. That could be big. I mean, inflation is clearly still a big topic for markets. Aussie interest rate decision on Tuesday. Not that big, to be honest, even though it's got lots of red there. Canadian inflation, not that important, I don't think. What else have we got? Oh, the G7 meeting. Okay, G7 meeting next week. Well, depending on who says what during that, Mr. Trump, we're looking at you. That could be interesting. That could cause some volatility. UK inflation on Wednesday morning. I think that could be a big one to watch. What else have we got? G7 meeting Thursday. Composite PMI, blah, 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 blah. PMI for the US on Thursday. And what's on Friday? Nothing interesting. So I would say the G7 is the big thing for next week to watch. So that will be interesting. See what that's like. See what comes out of that. There's someone's going to say something crazy, aren't they? We know who potentially it could be, but let's see. There could be a bit of volatility over the G7. Never a dull moment. Let's I'm going to do a little bit of a sales pitch first. I don't think I'm that salesy on these webinars, but I'm going to talk about the WhatsApp group for 2 minutes because I did an exclusive webinar session for the WhatsApp people this week. So I've been running the WhatsApp group for 2.5 years now. It's a daily update from me in the mornings, what markets I'm looking at, what trades I'm thinking of, what trades I've got going on, markets I'm watching, trades I'm running. At the moment, I'm long oil, long the dollar index, long the DAX, short gold. Yeah, so I talk about all of these trades and the reasons behind them and what I'm thinking about doing. If there's any questions, if somebody says, what do you think about sterling yen? I will put my opinion on sterling yen into the chat. So it's this group that's very free flowing. There's 2 updates during the day. I think there's about 60 people in the group. I'll do an update in the afternoon for the US for less than the price of a cup of coffee per day. I think you should try it for a month and see how it works with your own trading. If you use the code YouTube, you get 20% off the first month. Okay, the link is in the description. And then this week, on Wednesday just gone, I did a webinar. We did a webinar on day trading indices. So I talked through my approach for day trading indices, which I don't talk about in these YouTube live sessions. Talk about where to play stops, why entry is not all important. You know, everybody spends so much time on looking for entry setups, and of course it has has a place in trading, but it's not the be all and end all. How to quickly decide on a trade. You know, if I'm looking at a market, I don't want to spend 3 hours trying to figure out should I short gold. You know, I want to be able to make a decision in a minute or two. So I go through that, and then managing the position. That's the important bit. The important bit of the trade is actually managing it. You know, where you get in or where you get out. Of course, it has an impact, but it's what you do in the trade while you're in the trade that makes the difference. So that webinar, I ran that on Wednesday for the people in the WhatsApp group. If you join, I did record it. If you join the WhatsApp group, I'll give you access to that webinar. So a month would cost you 40 quid with the code YouTube. It is well worth 40 quid of anybody's money. You only have to stay in for a month. Most people have been in there for 6 months plus. Okay, so they see the value. I'm very happy about that. I'm glad they find it useful. It's a little bit of money for me. Everyone's happy. And it's a good discipline for me to go through my trading ideas every day. So morning and afternoon. So if you haven't tried it, give it a whirl is what I'm saying. Because I'm doing less and less YouTube stuff. Because I do, you know, I find it boring. And I'm old now. And I'd much rather be going out in the sun and doing a couple of trades than yapping away on YouTube. But I do update the WhatsApp group twice a day. So try it and see what you think. That's it. Okay, let's have a look at the markets. I'm going to have a look at these mixed22 and I'll go through the trades. So as it's opened up on gold, I went short gold last night. I was early. It was about 32.22, 3,222, something like that. And the market did go against me, but it's turned down. I think it's interesting, gold. I mean, absolutely. The big trend for gold is up, of course. Yeah, so if you go back, you know, it's been a phenomenal run, the price of gold. From the, I've got it here going from Feb last year. You know, Feb last year it was 2,000, and here we are, 31.80. So it's still up 50% over the last year. Absolutely cracking. But it has been correcting, you know, and for me, there was a big level that got broken earlier this week, about 3,200, 31.85, something like that. There you go. So yeah. So I sold the bounce back yesterday. So I sold the bounce back. I've moved the stop to trailing. Let's see what happens. I think that's an interesting market. I think if gold takes out yesterday's high, then I would flip again to looking to be a buyer. But I thought it was interesting that it did slip down to its worst levels for about a month. Yeah, absolutely. Big picture, big trend is up on gold. So I'd be a buyer in the dip in the bigger time frame. But I thought it was an interesting trade from a short-term point of view. Let's go back and look at our indices as usual. It's the same old with these indices, you know. Here's the S&P. Here's the S&P cash. So no overnight trading. And here we are. That's up to yesterday. We'll have a look at the real time in a minute. You know, if I was, I've been saying it in the WhatsApp group for about a week, you know, if I was looking at the S&P or the NASDAQ now, what's the target? The target is a run to all-time highs. I don't think it's going to get there in a straight line, but, you know, we've taken out this incredible bounce back that's been going since the beginning of April. We've taken out some big levels that were left on the way down in March and April. You know, this it looks like yeah, the worst is behind us. So let's see what happens. I think what's going to be interesting, can it get back to all-time highs? Does it break all-time highs? If it breaks all-time highs, here we go. Here comes the next bull market. Let's all pile in again. Yeah, that's going to be my approach. So there it is on the 24-hour market. So again today, where are we? A little bit higher than yesterday. So where was yesterday's close? The official close yesterday was here. Oh, actually, we're sort of bang on the close. That was the official close yesterday. And then, of course, we've got the 24-hour market. So 59.18, we're slightly higher. I would be a buyer of the dip, you know, because this is our trend, isn't it, on the old S&Ps. So, yeah, interesting to see. Does it, you know, it has come a long way. The trend is up. The market's gone from 4.8 to 5.9 now. So what's that? 1,100 point move. I can't do the maths in my head, but about 25%, something like that, since those April lows. There comes a point. Now, it's not going to do... No, it's unlikely it'll do 25% in the next month again. Wouldn't that be great if it did? You know, so there is... You know, I'd have to think there's going to be some sort of pullback soon. And that's when it gets interesting, you know, because it has had a bit of a rocket of a move since the 24th of April. Where did the buyers come back in? Yeah, if we do get the pullback next week, where do the buyers come back in? Overbought. That's pretty much the most overbought it's been since December last year, and we did have a bit of a wobble after that. So an interesting week ahead, particularly with the LG7 shenanigans. The trend is up. Let's see what happens. For now, for today, I'd be a buyer of a dip. Blah blah blah. All the usual. Can't argue with the trend and all of that. Yeah. Look at the Nasdaq. Same with the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq is less than 1,000 points from the all-time high, the old Nasdaq. So let's see. But again, can't argue with the trend on the Nasdaq. Yeah, I'd be a buyer of the dip. That's the little trade we did in the webinar. The little blue line, bought it and sold it. And the webinar on Wednesday night for the WhatsApp group. So yeah, a bit, what are the levels to watch? Well, what's the low for this week been? The low for this week. So going into next week, if we had a bit of a vicious sell-off, the in-session low for the Nasdaq is 20,605 from Monday. Which again is 700 points away from where we are now. So if we did get a bigger sell-off next week, I think that's one obvious level to watch. Yeah, the low for this week. But let's see. I do hope we get a sell-off. I hope it gets a bit more spicier. Again, be careful what you wish for and all that. But yeah, we've come a long way since those April lows. Let's have a bit of a flush out of the paper hands and see where the buyers step back in. Let's see what next week brings. So that's the old thingy, S&P and Nasdaq. The DAX, it's been a really good market for me, the DAX, over the last month or so. I've traded the DAX quite a bit. I'm long the DAX at the moment from earlier in the week because the trend has been up. Yeah, so it broke out to all-time highs. When did it do that? Monday this week. So this week we've seen all-time highs. We haven't actually seen that much progress on the week. That's the Monday all-time high, set at 8 o'clock on Monday, and that's still capping the market so far. Yeah. So again, let's see what happens. Our market's getting a bit tired up here in the short term. Let's see what next week brings. But again, for the DAX, if we did see a bigger sell-off, the low for the week was set yesterday morning at 23,300. It's been a fairly tight week in terms of range. If we get the bigger sell-off, let's see if 23.3 holds. So some stuff to watch there. The Spanish index, I bought something this week I've never ever bought before. I bought a Spain 35 exchange traded fund, and it's up 1.5% in my pension over the last 3 days. If I do that every 3 days for the next 2 years, I can retire. But no, the Spain 35 is an interesting index. It's a market I've never really looked at much, apart from the last couple of months, because the trend has been so strong. Here we are, all-time highs again today in the old Espanol 35. I'd be a buyer of the dip as usual, but it does show how these European markets, clearly the US have been strong as well, but European markets, the DAX, the Espanol 35, which is the IBEX, I think, hitting all-time highs, whereas US markets aren't there yet. But again, another interesting one next week. Do we get a bit of a sell-off there? The Italian, mamma mia, that's hit all-time highs again. Who'd have thought it? These third world European countries doing so well, their stock markets. Well done, Spain and Italy. So yeah, really interesting. But it is all looking a bit overheated. But as the famous saying goes, the markets can stay illogical longer than you can stay solvent. So for me, I'm happy to be a buyer of the dip. I can't help thinking, I've only realised the G7 is next week 10 minutes ago, but the more I think about it, the more I think that there's going to be a bust up or something, isn't there, that perhaps causes a bit of volatility. Let's see, I don't even know. Where's it being held, the G7? So yeah, let's have a quick Google. In Canada. Oh, Canada, with, what's his face, Mark Carney, isn't it? Nice, okay. So that's, let's see. Maybe that's the catalyst that spooks markets next week. But I do think if we get a bit more of a sell-off, it makes things a bit more interesting. So that's that. The Japanese, if I was paying attention to the Japanese index, I would have gone short. And you could still go short, couldn't you? Earlier in the week, because we had this downtrend. It broke out the downtrend. It had a bit of a spike through the old highs. I think the aggressive trade would be to go short the Japanese index because it has been moving a little bit different to everything else. With a stop above, I don't know, 39.6, something like that. Maybe it'll blast through it. But interesting, the Japanese market, the Nikkei, has been a bit different to everything else. So let's see. Let's see what next week brings. But I'd be maybe leaning more towards a short there. So the dollar index, I bought the dollar index this week. It's been a bit flip-flop. It's pretty obvious why I bought it. Have I got enough lines on that chart, do you think? Let's take those out. Yeah, the trend in the dollar index has been up since last Tuesday. I bought the dip in here. It's been up a bit, it's been down a bit, it's been up a bit. Let's see, it's been a bit boring actually. But interesting, that trend has been up. But you could also say, we had a bit of discussion about this in the WhatsApp group. There's always two sides to a market. It is never, I would suggest, clear cut whether you want to be a buyer or a seller, because that's the trend since on the dailies since Feb. So Feb, March, April, 3.5 months of downtrend. There's absolutely the argument to be a seller of the old doodah, the dollar index here. I've bought in because that trend is up, but there's absolutely an argument to be long or short there. So there you go. That's that. Another interesting one next week, again with all the G7 stuff going on. Gold, we talked about gold. I'm short gold. I've got a trailing stop on it. Is it going to bounce back? An aggressive trade if you want to be a buyer. Could be a buyer at 31.80. You could take the view, okay, the market overshot yesterday to the downside. We've rallied. It's come back. It's held above yesterday's low. I'm going to be a buyer with a stop under 31.20. Perfectly valid trade, I think, particularly given the big trend for gold is up. But for me, I am happy to stay short with my trading stop and see what happens. So, yeah. Bitcoin. This was interesting as well. Even an interesting week for the old funny money. Bitcoin, rallied up near the all-time highs, 108, 109, something like that. Let's call it 110. 110, the all-time highs, and has stalled. So if you wanted to go short Bitcoin, this is the perfect level in terms of risk-reward for Bitcoin. If you thought the whole crypto blockchain shenanigans was just nonsense and it's overvalued, going short with a stop above 110 is interesting up here. The big trend on Bitcoin is up, clearly, going back to September 23, if not further than that, obviously. But the latest leg we've in. But I thought it was interesting. It's had a good bounce off that old 75 level, but it hasn't broken out to all-time highs yet. Again, that's interesting. If that breaks out to fresh all-time highs, that's interesting to see whether that's the next move higher happening. So, but yeah, so far it hasn't. So let's see. Oil, I'm long oil. I was long oil last week. Am I still long oil? Yes, I am. I was long oil last week somewhere from Wednesday, in here somewhere. That was a good trade. Came out here. I bought back in here on Tuesday this week. I'm still in the trade and it's pretty much at break even. But this is another one where there's absolutely an argument to be a buyer or a seller. Right. So for me, that trend since last Monday is still just about up. Okay, it's fallen out the trend line, but it's held above what I consider a major low. So for me, I'm quite happy to stay long. But if you looked at the trend on the dailies, you could absolutely argue that since whenever that is, September 23, if not even the Russian invasion of Ukraine from March 22, 3 years ago, the trend is still down. So big picture trend, still down for oil over the last few years. Over the last 10 days, it's up. And over the last, 15 years, it's sideways. That's interesting, isn't it? So, we did touch a multi-year low in oil, down at 55. When was oil last $55 a barrel? All the way through here, actually. 2015 levels. Okay. So, excuse me. So I think that's another interesting one. So I'm long oil. I'm happy to stick with it. See, can it have a run back up to 64? It has sort of stalled this week, but I think that'll be an interesting one again next week. If it drops much below 60, I'll be out of the trade on oil, but I'm happy to stay long for now. Natural gas, another funny old week for natural gas. I'd be a buyer based on the dailies. I'd be a buyer. I would say the trend since Feb 24 is up, but if you looked at the last 6 months, it's pretty sideways. But also 287, the lows from December have held. So in the great scheme of things, for me, the trend in this natural gas is up. But it is, it's always a bit of a messy, crazy market, isn't it? It goes all the way up and it's come all the way back down again this week. I don't know. So for me, I'd buy it if it weakened much more than here, because I'd want my stop below 285 or something. But so I'm leaning to be positive on natural gas, but we're just seeing it trading in quite a big range and no real sustainable trends. So that's that. Some of the currencies are pretty boring. There's pound against the dollar, because the dollar index is a bit flip-flop. So a lot of the currencies is pound against the dollar, trading where it was sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm going to sneeze again in a minute. So not too much to say about that. Same with euro dollar. It's come off a bit because we've had a bit of dollar strength, but nothing too exciting there. Some of the commodity markets, a bit dull as well. We have seen big moves in the likes of coffee. That's all just a bit choppy at the moment. So nothing too exciting there. Live cattle. What's the cattle doing? The cows hit a fresh all-time high on Wednesday of this week. They backed off. Buying the dip in live cattle has been a sensible approach in recent months. It broke out. The big breakout was in December. It broke out through the March 2024 highs, and it moved a lot higher since, and it dips back, and the dips keep getting bought. So that's an interesting market, a little bit left field. So lots to watch next week, I think. Really, these stock markets are still strong. I would buy the dip, but they are overheated, if you look at where we came from. But if we looked at them a week ago, we'd say they were a bit overheated as well, and they've carried on up pretty much. It is every day this week. Every day this week, they've gone a bit higher. So what can you do? Let's see. DAX, I like these European indices because they have outperformed against other stuff, against the US markets. But do we get a bit of a cooling off? So I think that's interesting. So for me, a big focus is still very much stock market indices. So that's some stuff. We'll have a look at the stuff you want looking at now. Don't forget, try out the WhatsApp group. Trust me, you know me, I do not talk rubbish. The 40 quid subscription is worth the access just to last Wednesday's or Wednesday just gone's webinar alone. So you should sign up for a month, try out that webinar, and then you get all the other stuff on top. Yeah, and if you don't like it, you can send me an email saying you don't like it. I'll say thanks very much, but you won't get your money back. But most people stay in the group for a long time, and I think for the sake of 40 quid a month, try it. Just try it. There you go. Advert over. Right, let's have a look. Link is in the description. What do you want looking at? Blah blah blah. I know we're in a bull market. Yes. But quantum computing stocks have performed beautifully for me. Okay, QUBT, quantum computing. Okay. Yeah, that's a bit too nuts for me, that one. I don't like these little 2 quid to 26 quid, then back to 4 quid stocks. But fair enough. IONQ. Yeah, that makes more sense to me, that one. Nice trend, still going. IONQ. And what was the other one? RGTI. Rigetti Computing. They're pretty volatile. It's the volatility I have an issue with, but no, I can see it. Again over the last month or so, since we've seen them rallying. So yeah, nice one with those. UNH, yeah, United Healthcare. What happened? They filed for, because that's the one where the chief exec was shot and murdered, wasn't he, in the street? How long ago was it? 6 months ago? They're under criminal investigation, that's it. So they are under criminal investigation for possible Medicare fraud. Okay. And it's the one where the chief exec was shot in New York. So I think. So interesting, isn't it? Plunged 13% on report of DOJ, Department of Justice, probe into possible Medicare fraud. Interesting, isn't it? Because when the chief exec was shot. I think the stock didn't fall, but I mean, it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? Well, a bit of a gamble. I mean, it's more than halved. It's more than halved in the last month. But interesting to see where it stops. But I mean, who knows? I mean, an aggressive trade. Oh, I mean, there have been some nasty falls, isn't there? So what was it? So Monday it closed at 375. Yesterday it touched 250. Yeah, it's not one for me, but it's interesting to see how all that works out on that one. I'm waiting for a sell-off in the Nasdaq 100 to buy back in lower. It's been a crazy run. Yeah, me and you both actually. I did, I think I've talked in the past about how a lot of my longer term stuff, pensions and ISAs, if you're in the UK, has been in ETFs, Nasdaq and S&P ETFs, and I sold some at 58.75 last year in here. I sold some on the way down, and I sold some more down here just to take some risk off. So I'm waiting to get back in as well, and I'm waiting for the dip, but maybe we don't get the dip. So for me, if it blasts out, if we don't get the dip and it goes out to all-time highs, I'm going to start my long-term buying again, to be honest. So yeah, but that's why I think it would be interesting. It'd be really interesting to have a dip to see just how much conviction there is. I mean, clearly there was a lot of conviction on the way down, because markets were falling fairly consistently, and there's been a lot of conviction on the way up, isn't there? So the test now is the old wiggle, isn't there? If we get that, where do the buyers come back in? That's what I want to see. So hopefully President Trump, not hopefully, but hopefully, well, if he comes out with some more tariff stuff at the G7 when he sat next to Mr. Macron and Mr. Starmer, and he decides to slap some tariffs on stuff, that could spark some more volatility, couldn't it? So let's see. But yeah, it would be interesting to have a sell-off in these markets rather than this just constant rises, I think. Beyond Meat, BYND, Beyond Meat. They did really well, then they didn't do really well, didn't they? I've got no idea where they are now. Not doing really well. Oh my God, what an absolute... No. That is... Oh no, what did they touch then? So Beyond Meat, the old meat, I remember when they came out, July 19, $240 to... They've lost almost... Well, they've lost 99%. Shouldn't laugh. They've lost 99%. That's the problem, you see. If you go vegan, just go woke, go broke, as the old trope goes. But yeah, wow. So yeah, not. I mean, they're still weak, And this is of course what to roll out another old market trope, Oh, if it's dropped 99%, how much further can it go? Well, it can drop another 100%. It could go bust. It could drop 50%. Just because something's dropped an absolute bucket load. By this point here, May 22, it had dropped 90%. Yeah, and it has actually dropped another 90%. It went from 240 to 20, which is pretty much a 90% move, and it's gone from 20 to $2.50, which is another 90% move, isn't it? Interesting, good example that is of yeah. Anyway, not for me. The trend is still down. Blah blah blah. What is going wrong there at the moment? So we do. Let's get with the modern world and ask AI. What's happening? Okay, here we go. Why is Beyond Meat dropping, please? I always say please because when they're all ruling the world, they'll remember that I was polite to the robots. Several factors, including weak financial performance, declining consumer demand. US sales dropped 17%, margins collapsed, uncertainty and poor visibility in the plant-based protein market, blah, 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 100 million financing, This could be an intriguing case study in how consumer trends impact stock price. Would you like a deeper analysis? No, thanks. Interesting though, isn't it? That falling consumer demand. I wonder, is it because the meat substitutes market is more expensive with the cost of living? But then if someone's buying, they're not going to suddenly stop buying Beyond Meat and start buying, £2 steaks, are they? Interesting. Anyway, there we go. There's Beyond Meat. My completely uninformed ramble about that sector. BASF, 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 BASF. Where though? Which one? What stock exchange? Oh, that's the Indian stock exchange. Germany. Is that Germany? What is that? I don't know. Okay, I'm confused. I don't know. We've not got much history there, have we? Milan. Is the Italian the main listing? Well, that's BSF. That looks really boring to me, I'd have to say. It's all a bit sideways, isn't it? If that's the right listing, BASF in Milan. I mean, it's been in a range since September 22. 2 years now. It's near the bottom of the range, so I'd rather be a buyer of a dip than a seller. But it's all a bit boring, isn't it? TTE. TTE. Total Energies. This is, I mean, listen, we'll have a look at BP in a minute, because these oil companies had been doing well and aren't doing so well. I guess the falling oil price is having an impact as well. I mean, Total, there had been a great trend since March 20. So you could pay, what were they in March 20? 22 euros, and they hit 68. Great run. But, for me, that trend does look to be pretty much over. So if I was a buyer, I'd be patient. And if I was going to trade it, I'd wait to see how high the rally goes. But, I think, we've broken some big lows, Total, hasn't it? This low here from Jan, it did briefly go through this low. I suppose an aggressive trade, if you thought it had overshot a bit to the downside and wanted to be a buyer, an aggressive trade for me, a buyer at 53 euros with a stop at maybe 45 to see if it's all overshot and it's going to try and get its way back up to 68. But it does look like there's been a shift in longer term sentiment there. Absolute great trend all the way up. And it does look like it's sort of all rolled over a bit, isn't it? Let's have a look at BP. Now we're looking at Total. BP, here we go. Yeah, same with them. A good trend. November 2020. And just, what was the high? The high was actually 2 years ago. 560 and now 370. So that's dropped almost 40%, isn't it? In 2 years, BP. And again, that looks a bit not very healthy at the moment. Interesting. HK50. If buying, where would you place your stop? Actually, Tenerife Kev, if you happen to be in the WhatsApp group, could you put a comment in about how good that webinar was so everyone can join up? Thanks. Hong Kong 50. Where would your stop go? I keep missing this market. Hang on, let me bring up a different one. There's been some good opportunities to buy this market, and I have missed all of them. But there you go. I think the Hong Kong 50 has been interesting because we had the downtrend from Feb 21 down to October 22. Rallies, we get the retest, the old lows hold. So that was one interesting speculative buy. And then since January 24, so a year ago, it's been trending higher. So I should have bought it there, should have bought it there, should have bought it there, should have bought it there. So the problem I'd have now, if I'm looking at that picture now of that trend over the last year, my stop needs to be below there. That's where their stop is for the trend. Let's look for a more aggressive stop. So a more aggressive stop off the bounce back looks, something like that, doesn't it? So that would be, so where would our stop go? So that was Monday's high. So Monday's high was there, 23, just shy of 23,700. Monday's low, what was Monday's low? Is that Monday's low? Okay, so if I was buying it now, based off the hourly chart, the closer, and I would buy it because that trend on the hourlies obviously is up like it is in all stock markets at the moment. The closest I would want my stop is the other side of the Monday low, 22,980. Where's the market now? 23,345. So that's a 500 point stop. Something like that, isn't it? No, it's not. less than 400 point stop. So I think that's interesting. A more conservative stop would be further away, down at 22.4. But again, like so many of these indices, clearly everything, pretty much every stock market has been dragged up a bucket load over the last month. So interesting to see, does this carry on? But yeah, on the Hong Kong Hang Seng, I would put my stop under the lows for the week is what I would do. So let's see. Another interesting one to watch next week. If I remember correctly, hang on, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. SPG. So SPG. So Simon Property Group. I remember these. These used to do really well. Are they still doing really well? Let's have a look. Yeah, because I remember. I think I must have. I don't think I traded them last year, but I looked at them last year because of that trend. Interesting, isn't it? What do we think? So you could say, if you're going to take a really big picture view here from the COVID lows down there, something like that, then that sell-off was the buying opportunity within that trend since the COVID lows. So that was a 5-year trend by then. So big picture, I'd absolutely be a buyer. But as usual, I think that the shorter term is perhaps a bit more messed up. So if I was a buyer now off the daily chart, the closest I would have my stop is the other side of 136. But with the stock trading at 162, that's a 20% stop pretty much, isn't it? Which for me, it's not ridiculous, but it's quite a wide stop. But so personally, I'd rather buy the dip. We've already seen this week those old highs, about 170 give or take, have been a problem again. So do we get a chance to buy back in again? I don't know. So for me, it's a bit of a tricky one because it's sort of halfway up the range, isn't it? If you look at the range over the last couple of months, 190 to 136, it's pretty much slap bang in the middle. So I'd like to be a buyer, but I'd rather buy a pullback. And the problem is, what if the market doesn't pull back? Then I don't get in, do I? So it's interesting, but to me it's more interesting if we get a bit of weakness in there. If I remember correctly, some restaurant chains used to offer a Beyond Meat burger, but probably stopped as inflation, consumer price power changed. Yeah, it's really, that really is, just with, I might actually read about this later because that really is such a fall from grace, isn't it? So even in the pandemic, it did incredibly well. Hang on, am I looking at the right thing now? I'm looking at something completely different. Hold on a second. That is something. Beyond Meat. That's Beyond Meat on the NASDAQ. Okay, Beyond Meat. What's that? Oh, this is another company. There's another company called Beyond. What do they do then? That has also not done very well. Retail trade, internet retail. There you go. So the lesson from today's live session, don't include Beyond in your company name. So this is a retailer that's also fallen 95% since the highs. I'll read a bit more about that Beyond Meat thing because I think that's really interesting. Ticker code 2FE Ferrari. Isn't Ferrari's ticker code race? How do I get rid of that? Ferrari's ticker code, if Ferrari is the one you want, is race on the old US market. Is that what you wanted? I don't know what 2FE is. Let me put 2FE in. It doesn't like 2FE. Let me just Google it. 2FE. Ferredoxin. Oh, I don't even know what that is. Oh, Ferrari NV. So it's Ferrari trading somewhere else. But let's look at Ferrari, its main listing, which is in New York. So let's look at that. He's done amazingly well, Ferrari. I am a bit of a car nut, and it's look at this. Talk about there's no cost of living crisis as far as Ferrari are concerned. But so it came to the market in 2015. So was it spun out? Was it still owned by Fiat then? Was it part of the Fiat group then? Whatever. Came to the market about $58, and here we are just below $500. Not quite 10 years later. So that's a pretty cracking return, isn't it? in 10 years. The trend, so the trend has been up. So October 22, they were below 200, but it's starting to struggle, isn't it? There's absolutely an argument, an aggressive trade would be to go short Ferrari. Yeah. So, so when someone says, "Do you actually? If you're such a great trader, why haven't you got a Ferrari?" So actually, I'm such a great trader. I'm short Ferrari. That's how great I am. Interesting to see what happens up here. So we have these old highs. From where was that from? September, 498, then 510. And here we are again. So that's an interesting one for next week. So yeah, so the aggressive trade would be to go short. Is Ferrari running out of puff, and it's going to roll over? And I would, in terms of risk reward, it's an interesting trade, because if I thought that was going to fall, then my target would be for a run back to those 400 lows. If Ferrari breaks through $510 a share in the next few weeks, I would forget all about going short and I'd be looking to buy again. But I think it's interesting that it has, it's definitely stalled since September last year, the old Ferrari stock price. So let's see. Let's have a look at Porsche. Now we're on the subject of cars, because that was getting absolutely clobbered and still is. Interesting, isn't it? There you go. Look at the two. So Porsches are hardly cheap, are they? But Ferrari is in another stratosphere of price, of course. But Porsche's price, it was 120 euros in May 23, so 2 years ago, and now it's 46 euros. So Porsche's price has dropped 60 odd percent, is it? Something like that. It's more than halved anyway. And to my eyes, still looks a bit weak. There you go. The old Porsche, not doing very well. Let's look at BMW while we're on the whole car thing. I'm just looking at stuff I'm interested in now. Forgot about the webinar. There we go. Is that the right one? Which one is it? All right, that's all a bit sideways and boring, BMW. But no, I think it's quite interesting to compare and contrast the fortunes between Ferrari's stock price, which has done really well historically, and Porsche, which has taken a bit of a bath on its electric vehicles as well. Of course, Ferrari has not been, doesn't have to, maybe because of its production levels, pump out loads of electric vehicles. Porsche went down that route a few years ago, and it has been not successful, I think, like lots of other companies as well. But interesting. There we go. So Ferrari, let's see, does it stall up here? I don't know. And Kev says, the webinar on Wednesday was great. Simple tips that I made money from. The group is well worth the money. There you go. It's not even me saying that. So sign up to the WhatsApp group. Thank you very much for that. Cocoa ripping higher. Is it worth putting a trade on? I keep looking at Cocoa because, you know, it had that phenomenal run. You know, let's take that out. That phenomenal run in 2024. And it started in, you know, April 23, Cocoa was about 3,000. And then it was 12,000. So it went up fourfold by April 2024. And I always think, oh, is it about to go off again? And it, you know, it did last year, but then it failed. It was a false break. And now it's had a bit of a move. For me, it's just a bit too erratic, Cocoa. You know, it has these runs and they just sort of falter again. So, you know, in the great scheme of things, the Cocoa price is pretty much sideways, isn't it? Since April 24. So, yeah, it's not one for me. But if I was a buyer thinking, well, perhaps if we get a strong close today, everyone's going to pile in on Monday. I mean, yeah, there's a trade there, isn't there? You know, is that today's low? Yesterday's low. Is that yesterday's low? Yeah, yesterday's low, 97.67. So, you know, if I really thought it was going to go nuts, I'd rather buy the dip though. Looking at the hourly chart, I'd rather be a buyer of the dip. You know, that's maybe an interesting one for next week. I must admit, I don't pay much attention to Cocoa lately because it has all been a bit sideways. But on the hourlies, it's interesting, isn't it? So, yeah, let's see. Let's see what happens. So that's it, really, I think. If we haven't got any more questions, we're all done. I enjoyed today. We looked at lots of different stuff today, didn't we? So for me, next week, it's the G7. Does a certain leader of the free world say something controversial? If he doesn't, it looks like it could be a boring week. Stock markets are still going up. But, you know, you could absolutely make the argument they are overstretched, but they were overstretched coming into this week, and they carried on going up all this week. So I think that's interesting. Gold, interesting. Like I said, I'm short gold. Interesting to see what happens. Does it get its mojo back and start breaking higher again? I'm happy to stay short for now. Oil is a bit flip-floppy, bit boring. So for me, the big focus is still stock markets and these European stock markets. In all seriousness, I'm not. I do trade the S&P and the Nasdaq a lot, but I haven't traded it much in the last month because I think the trends have been clearer in the likes of the German index, the old Spain 35 index. Look at that. Those crazy Spaniards. And the Italian. I haven't traded the Italian. But some really interesting trends in these European markets. We didn't look at the FTSE, did we? FTSE is just probably doing nothing, is it? It's just trying the FTSE. So, what are we going to see? Are we going to see US markets break out to all-time highs in May, June? Or after the strong bounce back, will we do something of a correction? I can't help feeling we are due a correction. But let's see. Let's see what happens. Right, that's it. We'll wrap things up there. I will do it next week, next Friday, if I can be bothered, is the truth of it. But, hopefully I will be bothered. Try out the WhatsApp group. You get access to that webinar covering all that stuff that I did on Wednesday. And I think it's just try it for a month and see what you think. Go to the website. Link is in the description. To find out who I trade with, go to bit.ly/David Trade. At the moment, at the end of this week, all the trends that we've had recently are still continuing. So for me, it's been a good week of just going with trends. Let's see what next week brings. If you have any questions, you can always drop me an email. I'll always try and answer emails. My email address is dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. Like I always say, I don't have all the answers, but I've been doing this for nearly 30 years now, so I can give you the benefit of my experience and my opinion. And that's it. Okay, so until the next time, good luck with your trading. I hope it's sunny where you are. I'm going to go and have a walk, and hopefully we'll see you all next Friday. Thanks for coming along.